for DAO. And pretty soon we might get some, but right now there is none. So definitely, Astra, what's next?
What's next? What's next? Okay. There's so much to do more. So as our agenda is in a bit of change, we don't care. We play around. We feel good. So next keynote is about
Governance 101.
Governance 101. And it was supposed to delivered by Kyle Weiss from Gitcoin, but unfortunately, he said he can't join us. These things happen sometimes. But we have amazing solution for you guys because these two, one gentleman and one lady, they know a lot about DAOs governance. So who are they? Magnus Jones from EY, innovation lead, and Anna Graf, coming to us as, I mean, Magnus is already in our speakers list anyway, but Anna. Okay, cool. So thank you for joining, and please have a nice fireside chat, and please take the stage here so that you can enjoy the
You
camera
can
as
come
well.
more in center.
And you have 15 minutes. Yeah, please enjoy the center. Yeah.
Now it's.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hi everyone, pleasure to see you here and also many people joining through the afternoon and lunch. Yeah, before the lunch break, we now have a deep dive into governance and DAOs and decentralization. My name is Anna Graf. I am happy to have the stage together with Magnus Jones. We are both kind of the corporate bitches, where everybody would say, well, you're not these cool startup guys, you don't know anything of how implementing the cool stuff into our world. But this is exactly where we kind of see that governance processes are already established and we want to bring in the new stuff because this is what innovation is about. And especially when we look at DAOs, it is something that could be disruptive, must not be disruptive, or maybe it's something that is already there and that we just need to figure out what it is. And if we talk about governance 101, is this working? Oh, well, I just continue talking. Um, it is something that has been there like for forever because we humans, we are social beings. This is something that might still distinguish us from the AI we're talking about. And sometimes it's a little bit difficult because we need rules for our processes to be more efficient, to do what we want. And I think in our minds it's still kind of these tribal structures of around 100, and it works very well. But, well, population tended to grow more and more, so we needed more processes to put into the systems to work more efficient.
And now we even have slides.
Oh, we even have slides. This is a very corporate way of being. And there you also see from the first slide, maybe you go one step back because I was not really talking about who we are. I work for Bertelsmann, for Arvato Systems. Bertelsmann Group has around 140,000 employees worldwide. We are basically a media company. I work for the IT services, and I got this wonderful role of being innovation lead Web3. So I am one of the few people in the whole company who has the pleasure to work with these new technologies and also tell other people of how we can use them in a company that has been there for over 170 years. And this is the interesting part about governance in general. From a corporate perspective, of course, you have to please your shareholders in a way. So the shareholders, they participate in owning some parts of the company. In our case, it's still family-owned business, by the way. And all the stakeholders together have to work to get into the things that we see here on the slide, although I was already putting it in a way that I said the good governance. What is the good part in governance? And where do we also maybe want to go with DAOs? Because it has to serve a certain political way, a civil right way, and we will see that on the next slide. with all these things that you see here, one step back, because we didn't really talk about this. So I think a lot of these words you will recognize when we're talking about DAOs, and we'll continue to talk about DAOs. Consensus oriented. There might be hierarchies in most companies, but when we look at a consensus oriented way, we want everybody to participate in the process of voting rights, of doing the next steps. Participatory, exactly this. And still follow the rules of law. We want to be effective and efficient, accountable, and this is where blockchain helps a lot, transparent, responsive, and of course inclusive in the end. And when you look at good governance, we have to challenge like our system sometimes. Yeah, how does it work at the moment when we look into innovation, for example? It might be like there are two people and they decide, okay, this is what we want to do next. And then there are thousands of people who just have to follow this part of this is how we want to do innovation. And they are not even included in the process. And when I joined the company, I had the pleasure to host a workshop at our academy about DAOs. So I started this little game of telling people what DAOs could be. And we set up a pool with these soft balls. You might know them, and you can throw them at one another, and it doesn't even hurt you. And me and my colleague, we started the DAO, and we had a treasury. So people could put in something of value. Some even offered like their husband or their wife through a ring. And then we decided of how many voting rights they would get from that part that they put into the treasury. So it was quite interesting to see. Still, of course, we were the ruling part, but it was interesting to see how this was all evolving. And after having played this game, we were talking to our chief of innovation, and I said, how could that work inside the company? Like, could the company, for example, offer 5 days for everybody who wants to participate in the DAO? And with these 5 days, they would only work on a concept that was voted on by the DAO for innovation purposes. And if this concept is successful, the rewards go back into the DAO partly, and everybody might be happy. So this was kind of in short form the concept that I was pitching at the time. I think people liked it. Still, to me, of course, there are a lot of challenges that we would have to overcome to really implement this. And for the next slide now, to see like what we can do good about having good structures and governance, it's something that Magnus is always working a lot on. So maybe I will hand this over to you if you want to take this.
Absolutely. And this is some of the important areas that is out there for sure. I'm personally an advisor to the counterterrorism group on crypto for the United Nations, and I'm also part of the Interpol expert group on metaverse. So this is something that we work hands-on with all parties who's involved there. Everything from the startups to the corporates who is moving into DAO structures. And regardless of what we heard on the last session, I would like to challenge some of these things as well, because there's no such thing as fully decentralization. And I will get back to that, just hanging it as a teaser for my other talks here. But these are the key things, because there's no way that a society in general will let a totally, apparently, pseudo-anonymous, not decentralized setup handle none of these things. We have to have the AML, we have to take care of these things, but we have to might do it in a slightly different way than we do in the ordinary world. It's not maybe about KYC, know your customers, but maybe KYT, know your transaction. Because after all, it's 1 and zeros and it's traceable. And I will get back to that. But have in mind that these things here, they are key for a DAO to succeed and in the governance structure.
Yeah, and maybe so that other people who are watching us can see you, it would be great if you come
I need
here
to switch
and
that
I
slides.
can do this for you.
Go on. But anyway, cautious of time, we need to also see here in terms of what is sort of the DAO characteristics. And we talked a little bit about that previously today. But in terms of governance, who is the stakeholders? We will get a little bit back to that because it's not necessarily one-to-one that everyone is a member of the DAO or necessarily a user of a DAO. That's two different things. So who is actually the management? Who can make influence share? And what is the difference between the on-chain and off-chain voting when you are to decide the governance? And also the important questions about whether or not you have a DAO that has a financial interest in it or not. That's two totally different things. And you know, when values or money comes in, that's when people start to fight. So that's when the challenges arises. So
Next slide.
if we look into here, it's fairly small, but I think you can see it on the screens, and it's more for you to read afterwards also, and more than happy to share this one. But as you can see here, in terms of the standards that we normally set out in an ordinary governance setup and a structure, we need a balanced distributed power. And that's down to that, as what I briefly mentioned, who has the power of concentration? Is it one leader or is everyone actually equal? Are they independent? Are they being affected by influencers, whatever? But also setting up decision-making effectiveness of having it democratic and transparent. That's sort of the wish for all processes. But also on the operational reliabilities of securing quality in the whole thing there. And all of these things, as you can see, DAOs in general, they can in theory handle. But that's said in theory, and we'll get a little bit back to that, because we can all say we have a joint mission with a purpose which is clear defined, because sort of the code in the law is written in the code. That's the code of the corporate. The business statute, that's in the code. You want to join this? All terms and conditions are then in practice in the code. But still, who is actually joining?
And the good point is that it's not only then one single person, the king, who decides. That always is in any company. Like you have this one person, and if that person doesn't like you, you might be out of that inner circle, and that might be working quite well. But this is where this comes in handy, having these rules written down and automized, and to just give again like one hands-on example how we do this in the company, and maybe you can also tell this about EY. For implementing these new technologies, we have from top down a leadership circle where every division sends 1 or 2 persons, and then we also have a blockchain community where everybody can participate who wants to do this. And I think this could also be one of the like entry points for DAO system to vote from down to bottom and let the leadership circle know what they want. And like this, we can really like tackle the innovation process from both sides, and everybody feels included.
And these things that we have up here, they are easy to understand, so to saying, from a, call it the use case of the DAO, of having a clear mission. Everyone apparently works for the same cause. You have access to it, you have the participation and the conducting process. But in practice, if you look into this one, we see that we have different roles here. We have the developers. And then in order to vote and do something on the DAO, you have to have a governance token. And you do not necessarily have a governance token if you're just a user of the DAO necessarily either. You can have sort of A, B shares, so call it the stupid simple user of this example, to make a DAO, the DAI there, you just use the platform. But you can have owners sort of saying there who has a larger interest, who has more governance tokens and a much higher voting right than you. And
More
also,
balls in our case to throw them at the
exactly.
other person.
So it means that the development team, they can have lots more governance tokens than all others. So they can have 40%. That's totally normal. And thereby, is it one-to-one? Is it actually equal? And who is running the DAO Foundation also? That's down to a question, what kind of role do they have? Because they are just human beings. Yes, you have a set off-chain and on-chain votes, but we can just see as the example of, for example, some of you might have heard about a popular NFT game called Axie Infinity. They have a pretty large community. They're the world's largest, most popular NFT game, sort of thing. And they have lots of users, but they have also lots of people who's only in there to try to make a quick win. So when they run through the voting on the Discord, their community groups, they see that there's no consistency towards the voting because lots of people either one, don't care about the vote, or two, just vote randomly. So rather there, they have mapped their core users because they can identify them in Discord and say, hey, this user, that user, and that user, and that user, these are actually our users. Let's rather see what these kind of people say compared to all of the others. All of the others might say this off-chain, then they listen to the ones who is actually the users, and that's down to the DAO foundation, the people who is implementing it. Is that fully decentralized or not? That's kind of the questions that we need to look into the structure. So in theory, this is working very good, but in practice, it's down to the human element that it is de facto humans that is in there. Who is affecting who? So for, call it psychology purpose, I think the theory holds very well, but where we are right now, we see in practice, it's a totally different setup in terms of the executions, and it varies a lot from DAO to DAO.
Still, I would say that there's another chance, and this is the chance of collaboration between different entities. Like he's from EY, I'm from Arvato Systems, and sometimes it's very, very hard in this corporate world. You have like a month or 2 months to even become a supplier, and I see a lot of opportunities working with tokens that are accepted from either entity to simplify and facilitate also these processes of working together between different companies and sharing the same consensus on governance structures. So hopefully we gave you some insights into this boring corporate world, which is not always so boring, and where we also try to do something for the good for the future and implement new ideas and structures. Thank you very much.